Good morning, friends, or once again, good evening, as it is at my house. But you guys will be seeing this in the morning. So, good morning, friends. Today, our book is called The Widow's Broom. What do you notice about that broom? Looks like it's sweeping all by itself. So, we will be reading The Widow's Broom today. This is a fun one. I like it. It's a little bit of a mystery for you guys to figure out. So here is your 2-sentence summary. A witch's worn-out broom serves a widow well until the neighbors decide it is dangerous. The neighbors destroy the broom, but the widow tricks them. Ooh, you guys get to figure out what the trick is. All right, so let me get that in there so you can see it. There's a lot. Can you guys see that okay? All right, I hope you can pause it so you can get what you need to do. Okay, so this is the questions that we're looking for. Question of the day. What happened to the broom at the end of the story? How do you know? Why do you think the widow did that to her neighbors? Give evidence from the story to support your inferences. Okay, so we have to read to find out about. Look at the title page. You got a broom holding an axe. Once again, we're looking out for, who are we looking out for, friends? That's right, we're looking for Fritz. Okay, here we go. Witches' brooms don't last forever. They grow old, and even the best of them one day lose the power of flight. Fortunately, this does not happen in an instant. A witch can feel the strength slowly leaving her room. The sudden bursts of energy that once carried her quickly to the sky become weak. Longer and longer running starts are needed for takeoff. Speedy brooms that in their youth outrace hawks are passed by slow flying geese. When these things happen, a witch knows it's time to put her old broom aside and have a new one made. On very rare occasions, however, a broom can lose its power without warning and fall with its passenger to the earth below, which is just what happened one cold autumn night many years ago. Out of the moonlit sky, a dark cloaked figure came spinning to the ground. The witch, along with her tired broom, landed beside a small white farmhouse, the home of a lonely widow named Mina Shaw. We talked about widow today and what that means, yesterday. That's because the widow, Mrs. Silver, is a widow. That means she doesn't have a husband. So in this case, the widow is named Mina Shaw. At daybreak, Widow Shaw discovered the witch lying in her vegetable garden. She was bruised and bloody and couldn't stand up on her own. In spite of her fear, and because she was a kind woman, Mina Shaw helped the witch inside and put her to bed. The witch asked Mina Shaw to draw the curtains, that means close them, then wrapped herself tightly in her black cape and fell soundly asleep. She lay there perfectly still all day and all evening. When she finally awoke at midnight, her wounds had completely healed, because she's a witch, right? She rose from the bed and moved silently through the widow's house. Mina Shaw was asleep in a chair by the fireplace, where embers of a dying fire glowed on the hearth. The witch knelt and took one of the red hot coals in her hand. Outside, she made a fire of leaves and twigs, then dropped a strand of her hair into the flame. The fire hissed and crackled, burning a brilliant blue light. Before long, the witch could see a dark form flying overhead. It was another witch, who circled slowly and then landed beside the fire. These two women spoke briefly, the first witch gesturing toward the garden where her old broom rested. Then they sat side by side on the second witch's broom and flew off over the treetops. So they left the broom there. When Mina Shaw woke the next day, she wasn't surprised to find her guest had gone. Witches, she knew, had unusual powers. It didn't surprise her either when she saw that the old broom had been left behind. The widow guessed it had lost its magic. It was an ordinary broom now, just like the one she kept in her kitchen. She began using it around the house and found that it was no better or worse than the broom she'd used before. One morning, Mina Shaw was still in bed when she heard a noise coming from the kitchen. She peeked in and saw something that made her heart jump. There was the broom, sweeping the floor all by itself. It stopped for a moment and turned to the widow and then went back to work. Now remember, she's a widow and she's on a farm and she doesn't have any help. It's just her that has to do all the chores. At first, Mina was frightened, but the broom seemed harmless. You guys see it okay? But the broom seemed harmless. And what's more, it was doing a very good job. Unfortunately, it swept all day long. In the evening, to get some peace, she locked the broom in a closet. But when it tapped on the door for more than an hour, Mina felt guilty and let it out. As she lay in bed listening to the broom sweeping each room over and over, she wondered if it could learn to do other things. In the morning, she led the broom outside and found out that it was a very good student. She needed to show it how to do something only once. Soon the broom could chop wood and fetch water, feed the chickens, and bring the cow in from the pasture. It could even pick out simple tunes on the piano. All right, it's a talented broom. It's chopping wood. Not a week passed before the widow's neighbors, the Speevies, found out about the broom. Their farm was just down the road, the only other space around. It was one of the 8 Speevie children who saw the broom first. When the boy told his father, Mr. Speevie ran across the road to the widow's house. "Is it true?" he demanded. "Did she really have such a broom?" "Oh, yes," Mina Shaw answered. "It's wonderful." She told her neighbors all about the broom and the witch who'd left it behind. Then she took them around to the back of the house where the broom was hard at work splitting wood. Mr. Speevie was horrified. "This is a wicked, wicked thing," he said. "This is the devil." The broom stopped working and, still clutching the axe, hopped toward the widow and her neighbor. Mr. Speevie, red-faced with anger, turned quickly and hurried home. So the broom was holding the axe and hopped towards the neighbor. Imagine how scary that guy must have felt. How, oh my gosh, it's gonna come get me. Some more distant neighbors heard about the broom and visited the widow's farm. The men who saw it seemed to agree it probably was a wicked thing. But the wives pointed out that it was such a great help to the widow and could play the piano well, considering it was only playing one note at a time. No one's feelings were as strong as Mr. Speevie's. "It's evil and dangerous," he would tell anyone who would listen. "We'll all be sorry if that thing stays among us." As the days went by, the broom seemed as innocent and hardworking as ever. Though it had learned how to do many things, sweeping brought it special pleasure. It was, after all, a broom. Occasionally, when there was nothing left to do around the widow's house, it would hop down the road that separated Mina Shaw's and the Speevies' farms. The road was dirt, of course, and the broom could amuse itself for hours because it likes to sweep. Oh no. One afternoon, 2 of the Speevie boys and their dog walked along the road where the broom was happily at work. When they saw what it was doing, they kicked the small stones the broom had swept aside back into the path. The broom ignored them and shuffled off to sweep another part of the road. But the Speevie boys would not leave it alone. They called the broom names. When it continued to ignore them, they picked up a couple of sticks and started tapping the broom's handle. Finally, it stopped sweeping. The broom turned to the boys and knocked them both on the head, so hard they fell to the ground in tears. The broom hopped off, but the Speedy dog ran after it, yapping and biting. All of its bristles. But get him, the boys called. The little dog leaped into the air and caught the broom by the handle, but he was not there for long. Look at what they did to the dog. Well, Mr. Speedy thought that the broom was bad before. Now what do you think he's going to think the broom is? He's going to think what, guys? That it is really bad. Look. What do you think he's going to do? Looks like he's going to grab it. That evening, Mr. Speedy drove his wagon up to the widow's house. He was not alone. 3 men from the neighboring farms were in the wagon, along with a long wooden stake and coils of rope. Mr. Speedy knocked loudly. When she opened her door, Mina was frightened by what she saw. "We've come for the broom," her neighbor told her. "It's beaten my sons and likely done worse to my dog. The poor animal was nowhere to be found." The widow could tell by their faces that the men would not be leaving without her broom. There was nothing she could do to stop them. For a moment she stood silently, then answered, Of course you were right. If it could do such a thing, we must get rid of it." She led the men into her kitchen. "It sleeps in there," she whispered, pointing to a closet. "If you move it carefully, it will not wake up." The men knew how strong the broom was, and hoped the widow was right. Now I want you to think really quick. How many brooms did the widow have? Remember, she had a broom, the new one from the witch, and then she had another one. Did they look kind of the same? Interesting. Look here. That's smoke. What did they do to the broom, guys? Looks like they lit it on fire. They opened the closet door, revealing the slumbering broom. One of the farmers took it out and gently held it against the stake, while the others wrapped it in yards of rope. They carried the broom outside, drove the stake into the ground, and gathered straw around it. Mr. Speedy lit the fire. In no time, flames turned the broom to ashes. Life soon returned to normal around the widow's farm. The Speedies even found their dog healthy but hungry, caught in the branches of a tall spruce tree. I'm sorry about these pages. It's really an awkward book to hold. Then one morning, Nina Shaw called on her neighbors with frightening news. She had seen the ghost of the broom. It was as white as snow and moved through the woods at night, carrying an axe. Mr. Speedy did not believe her, but that night, under a full moon, he watched from a window as the broom's white ghost came out of the woods and slowly circled his house. The next night it returned, circling even closer, and the next night after it came again, tapping the axe lightly on the Speedy's door. Dun, dun, dun. There it is. So it's going around, so it's circling around their house, it's going around their house. And each night it gets a little closer to the house. And then on the last night it knocks on the door. Would that be freaky? That would freak me out if that ever happened. What's this? Looks like what, friends? If you said the broom, you are correct. The next morning, Mr. and Mrs. Speedy packed their dearest possessions and 8 children into their wagon. Mr. Speedy tried to convince the widow to leave with them, but she chose to stay behind in her little farmhouse. She went down to the road as the wagon pulled away and waved goodbye to her neighbors. "You're a brave woman," Mr. Speedy called. Out that evening, the widow fell asleep in her chair by the fire. She'd been listening to music Simple tunes played one note at a time on the piano. What does that? What thing plays one note at a time on the piano? A gentle tap on the shoulder woke her. She looked up and smiled at the broom. Not a ghost after all, but still covered with the coat of white paint she had given it. You play so nicely, Mina Shaw said. The broom bowed, put a log on the fire, and played another tune. So she painted it white. Why do you think she painted it white, guys? Okay, so we have question of the day. What happened to the broom at the end of the story? How do you know? You're not going to write the broom was burnt because the broom ended up not being what? That's right. It ended up not being. So the broom what? And how do we know? How do we know that the broom was not burned up? Okay. What were the clues? I think the widow did this to her neighbors because. So why did she trick the neighbors? Okay. And then on the back side, what do you think of Mr. Speedy? What do you think? Why? What do you think of his character traits? And why? What do you think of Mina Shaw, the widow, and why? All right, so what are her character traits, and why do you think that? And then, what do you think of the broom, and why? What are the character traits of the broom, and why did you choose those? Okay, so that is your assignment for the Widow's Broom. I hope you guys enjoyed the story. I know it was a little awkward with the pictures, but I did the best I could. So I hope you guys are well, and I'll see you later. Bye.